Ground level theology, breaking it down, making the complex simple. No need to frown, bringing the wisdom from the tower to the street. Making theology enjoyable for everyone we meet. No need for big words, no need for fuss. Ground level theology for all of us. Exploring the depths, unraveling the mysteries, taking on a challenge, simplifying histories. Ground level theology, oh yeah, making sense of the concepts, loud and clear. No need to be a scholar, no need to be elite. Ground level theology, making it sweet.
All right, welcome back everyone to Ground Level Theology, the theology with the best music, I might say. With me as always is the co-host to Ground Level Theology, Dave Hoffman. Dave, welcome back.
Thank you, but I think we have an imposter. I don't know. It looks like we have someone new on with us.
Yeah,
are you trying to replace me, man?
we are I think I may have found a better Dave here. With us today, folks, is David Gilmore. David, welcome to Ground Level Theology. You're muted. I left them speechless, folks. Welcome to Ground Level Theology.
Thanks, guys. I'm excited to be here. This is going to be a great conversation.
Yeah, folks, we have a great one today. We are actually going to be talking about music, songs, and all that jazz. You see what I did there?
I heard it.
All right. Yeah. Dave, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Because you're an apologist, right?
I am, yeah. Well, I'm connected. I know Mike because I've taught at his church before, and I filled in the past. I was connected to the pastor that used to be there, but Mike and I have continued that relationship, and that's been great. But yeah, I run a website called Legati Christi, which is Latin for Ambassadors for Christ, and that's kind of my main thing that I do. But recently, I've really been I've always been a fan of music, and I wanted to try to find some way to connect those two loves together, and I think I've got a pretty good idea about that now. So I'm here to just kind of share and kick that idea around a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, how did you make kind of that jump from apologetics to music? Because I wouldn't really think of those as intertwined, you know?
Yeah, sure. So it all happened when I was listening to Bach.
Let's go Bach in time.
Yeah.
You were waiting for that, weren't you?
Oh man.
I was a couple centuries.
No, one of the things in apologetics, we have various arguments for the existence of God, and there's we have the classic arguments and stuff, but I've always felt like there's kind of this untapped arena of creativity and creative thought and just really appreciating how creative humans are compared to other things, right? And the first kind of idea that I had about creativity and using it as an apologetics argument was it really has to do a lot with more about human exceptionalism, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like we are exceptional beings. If you compare us and what we are to the other animal kingdom, we're so exceptional, it's ridiculous. We just there. You can't really get there from here. We're so far apart in terms of our development. It's not really much of a line to go from even like the basic primates. You know what I mean? Like it really, it's an argument against, I guess, evolution primarily, but so I was thinking about this one day, and I thought, humans are so much more creative than animals. Like we do things for aesthetic value, and my first thought about it had to do with building things, even like when, sure, there are animals that build structures, but they don't build the Taj Mahal.
Yeah.
We as humans put aesthetic qualities to things, and even so, so I thought about that, and then what happened one day when I was listening to Bach, it was like, it is so. I was just contemplating how complex I think I was listening to the Brandenburg Concertos, and I was just contemplating how complex that is, and not just the music, that was the sounds that were coming out, but the whole enterprise of making that music. Like, of course Bach, he created it, and he's the one who kind of formulated it all together and made the music. But even for him to make the music, someone had to decide, this is what A sounds like, this is what B sounds like.
Yeah.
And then after that, someone created an entire written language, music notation, to be able to communicate when Bach says, I want you to play, staccato here. They had to create a language to do that, to make music. And even like Bach was a multi.
Who came up with that? How can I beat them up for me now being off key? I don't think I'm off key. I think he just did not define it properly.
Well, so we attribute the creation of most notes to Pythagoras, actually, because he's the first person that really he decided, you take this string, and the string is this length, and you pluck it, and it makes this sound. And oh, look, if you cut it in half, it makes. And my music theory isn't great, but that's kind of the idea. Is he's the first one that really kind of developed that notion. So, and he got a little crazy with it, because he was thinking that he actually attributed divinity to music itself as a divine thing. But it all started out with Pythagoras, really, and then it kind of went up the way. But yeah, I want to say in the, I don't know, the 11 or 1200s, there was an Italian monk, and his name escapes me, who's the one that created, but he was a monk, a Christian monk, who created the written language of music. The standardized written language of music. Other people had tried to do it before, but he's the one that kind of decided, this is what a rest looks like. This is what an eighth note looks like. This is what, this is the scales and all that kind of stuff. Not scales, so but the notation.
The music sheet as we know it.
Correct. Right. So, but it was so important to him to be able to communicate music to people that he decided he was going to make this language, right? And not just that, but like, Bach played many, many, many instruments, but you always see him sitting in front of this piano looking thing, and that's a harpsichord. Bach was in what we call the Baroque period of music, and they didn't have pianos yet, so he was playing this harpsichord. And even the harpsichord, when you look at it, it's not simple. It was a craftsman who decided he wanted to put beauty into the visual aspects of this instrument. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And because in other words, if it was just to serve a utilitarian purpose, it could just be straight in a box. But I challenge you to go on the internet and look up pictures of a harpsichord and find one with straight legs. They're all curvy looking. They're all, knobby knee. They're all very refined looking. So I thought about all that stuff, and it's like, man, we really, 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 really pour a lot of creativity into music, and we ascribe a lot of beauty into music. And not only that, but even venues, like now, of course, we can make these gigantic speakers and stuff, but before electricity, they design, and they still do, like venues are still designed with certain sound qualities, but they would design venues specifically to make music sound a certain way. So we as humans put so much effort into sound and into making things beautiful. And I thought about that, and I was like, man, it is ridiculous to think that what we do is like bird song. You know what I mean? It's like, it's just so ridiculous to think that they're even the same thing. They're not even in the same ballpark. And like a bird, all a bird can do is chirp. That's all it can do. But we just call it bird song because it sounds like what we do when we sing. It's not that it's like, oh, I sound like a bird. No, the bird sounds like us. That's why we say the bird is singing. You know what I mean?
Right. That's the
So,
personification,
right.
like us
So,
attributing human attributes to either a object like a rock or something, or even animals themselves.
right. So that's kind of the apologetic part of it is
Yeah.
to just show how and there's the popular arguments are going to be the Kalam cosmological argument, the teleological argument, the argument from design, the moral argument. Those are kind of like the classic arguments, right? But there's also other arguments like the argument from desire, um,
Yeah.
which and there's also arguments from aesthetics that
I was
we can
about to
argue
say,
that.
it sounds like that argument is
Yeah,
essentially an
yeah. I
aesthetics
mean,
argument.
we can argue about what is beautiful, but we all know that beauty itself exists. Objectively know that it exists.
Right.
We may not think that the same things are beautiful, but we know that it exists. So it's a lot about aesthetics.
This is kind
Um,
of random, but a fellow PhD student, she's currently, well, she's going to be entering her dissertation portion, and she's writing a dissertation on something pretty similar to this topic that we're just talking about right now, as far as aesthetics and understanding beauty, but hers
yeah,
is more in a theology of awe.
yeah,
And I asked her um what she thought of in people that found beauty in the grotesque.
yeah,
And I thought that was a really interesting question, only because there are people like that, and she went on to the question. She didn't dive deep into it. Um but I don't know, I'm sort of thinking like, well, when we talk about beauty and aesthetics, that is absolutely true. I mean, just take one look at the Sistine Chapel.
right.
Take one look at Notre Dame, that church,
Yep.
and St. Peter's Basilica. You'll clearly see these are not just four walls and a roof.
Right. Right.
There is immense artistry that are poured into this, and even as you go like into the halls of time, and you go into a commoner's house, their chair is not merely something to sit on, but there
Right.
is some craftsmanship even in there.
That's right.
You can't help but create this aesthetic beauty to everything around you, right? And I think I like that argument, not merely to just prove God, but to sort of start a conversation of, do you really think we derive from animals? The beaver, he creates a house, but it's nothing like, modern architecture or
Right.
even old architecture. And
Right.
they're all the same. It's just simply a cave that they could go into. And so we see a distinct difference between the animal world and what they create. And indeed, they create these various things, but what's lacking is sort of this aesthetic beauty, as you're pointing out.
Yeah. And then it also touches on several doctrines. Creation. When we start talking about in systematic theology, when we start talking about the doctrine of creation, most of the time that discussion ends with nature. But there's so much more. I totally see God as a storyteller. And another kind of interesting thought that I've had about creativity is so many. If you look at so many different like hero myths from disconnected cultures, so many of their heroes have the qualities. So many of their heroes have the qualities that we would find in Jesus.
Mhm.
So sorry, there's some noise in the background. So there's some things to be said for that, and so because we are kind of conditioned for those kind of things as God as a storyteller. So and I can see the same kind of thing with creativity and creating music. I mean, there are certain sounds in nature that we enjoy. There are certain images that we enjoy that we see as objectively beautiful, even in nature, and I think that's part part of this too. So there's part of doctrine of creation that's there. I think that it's also part of the doctrine of being in the image of God, because God clearly enjoys music. So, things like that. So I see it touching a lot of bases.
Yeah, I mean, I think what instantly comes to mind for all of us, including our viewers, is sing to him a new song, right? I mean, our praise, our worship, our devotion is not exclusively musical, but it certainly, comes to life in music itself. We inherently as creatures want to worship God, and we want to also do it through sounds, which is a really
Right.
interesting thing to think
Yeah.
of. Yeah, go ahead.
No, you're saying that worshiping through sounds. I was just thinking also about there's something about music and learning and education and memory even, because if you think about it, we hem and haw about having to memorize Bible verses, right? Like I could never memorize whole chapters of the Bible, but yet we can sit here and like I can probably start a song singing the first couple notes of a song, and we could just rattle off the entire all the verses of our favorite songs. You know what I mean?
Right.
So and we had at our church this weekend, we had a guy from a ministry. I don't remember exactly what it's called, but they're Messianic Jews. And at the end of the service, he actually sang the benediction. And I asked him at the end, I said, I'm just curious, and I thought I knew what his answer was going to be, but I said, I'm curious, why do you sing the benediction? And he said, oh, because it makes it easier to memorize. And he's absolutely right, So throughout time, it's been it's been a teaching mechanism, to kind of use music as a way to teach and learn and worship and things like that. So
Yeah, and I know Dave there above me. He's no stranger to that, coming from the Westminster Confession and all the hymns in his pews and stuff. And Dave, I gotta ask you, what is the secret chord that God likes?
Isn't it that the secret chord that David plays on his harp in Hallelujah?
Yeah. What chord is that?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I'll sing it out of pitch, that's for sure. No, like it's amazing. I don't remember. Yeah, when I was trying to remember all 107 questions of the Westminster Shorter Catechism as one of my exit exams, I went to Spotify and listened to some dude with his acoustic guitar singing the answers.
Yep.
When I had to memorize the entire book of James at Moody, and when I had to memorize the entire book of 2 Timothy at RTS, I did it to song.
Right.
Or just like you sing it. It's not any melody. It was just, humming it. And I also know that was, it. A lot of times, people they didn't have copies of the Bible all the time, and so how they learned theology was through their creeds, their confessions, and the singing of hymns.
Yep.
Spiritual songs. And so they could sing it along the road in their head.
I think the classic example of that is Amazing Grace, right?
Yeah.
It's like,
it's a great one.
They're in the bars. We know they know the bar tunes.
Right.
Let's rip out the lyrics and let's replace them with this, and at least they'll be able to sing along. And that is like the classic hymn now, that stood the time and continues to be the hymn that everyone knows.
Yeah, find someone that knows the fourth verse of that song, and you shake their hand.
Well, with all the renditions of it, it's like they're probably going to know the Phil Wickham version now instead.
Oh, that's like the Grace Like Rain. Where it's like, or Chris Tomlin's like, oh, we need to add a chorus to this hymn.
Yeah.
Can't stand alone.
Chains are broken.
Yes. Amen, brother.
Yeah. So.
But I love. It is good. I think the Lord did create music. There's an ontological thing. There's an anthropological element. There's obviously a theological element where I know God loves music because he loves sound, because he gave us ears.
Right.
You could just, and he created frequency and all these beautiful little things of here's an eardrum, and it allows you to pick up sound.
Well, and so many of the visions that are given to people in the Old Testament and in Revelation, they include these choruses of people singing to God. So yes, he clearly loves music,
I mean, the angels do it.
Mhm.
I mean, you have seraphim, and that's all they do 24
Right.
hours a day. They just sing to him.
Yeah.
I mean,
holy, holy, holy.
A kind of a cool thing is, I'm not sure how familiar you guys are with the lore of Lord of the Rings, but
It's all right.
no, but I mean,
Yeah.
some people aren't familiar with the Silmarillion, so I don't know how far that goes, but
I
the
mean,
way that
Yeah, you're gonna have to expound it for at least our audience.
okay,
At least for the audience, yeah.
okay, so the Silmarillion is a series of stories that Tolkien wrote as the world building before he wrote Lord of the Rings.
Mhm.
And the way that the world is created is through song. So Tolkien has one god, Eru Ilúvatar, who has existed forever. But then he makes these other beings who share in the creation with Eru, and the way that they enact creation is through song. And they even describe it as Melkor, who was kind of like the Satan-like rebel of the beings that get created. It's described as he introduces discord into the song, and that's what messes up the world. So, and that's kind of an interesting take on a creation story, is that it comes through song. I of course kind of like that idea, but I thought that was kind of cool.
Oh, is that why we have minor keys?
That's because they're too young.
Oh.
No, but I mean it's true too, because like even with like the dissonance sound, right? That has some aesthetic power as well.
Yeah.
It's sort of hard to not talk about music and use story, right? Because there's so many parallels to that. It's sort of story becomes a good analogy for music, and music becomes a good analogy for story.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna try and say it this way, but that dissonance is sort of, the plot. It's our hero is in jeopardy, and what we want as human beings is we like resolution. We like
Mhm.
we like stories to finally be tied into a knot, into a perfect bow, and presented nicely. And so we really dislike when music ends on a dissonant note, because
Right.
we would like to see it fulfilled and resolved. And so I think what's funny about music is how much it correlates to story as well, right?
Mhm. Yeah, and you're just talking about the audio part of it.
Yeah.
But there's we were talking about the apologetic angle. Another thing that I realized is that art in general, whether it be painting or sculpting or whatever, building, oftentimes, is oftentimes man's use of his creative processes to chew on big picture questions. And that I saw that coming out a lot in song lyrics, right? Like, just for example, there's a band which you guys are far too young to remember, called Styx. and they have this song. One of the songs is called "Show Me the Way," and it's this kind of lament where the singer is, and the vocalist's name escapes me at the moment. I'm kind of embarrassed, but
was it Tommy Shaw or the other?
No, Tommy Shaw is the guitar player, although he did sing a lot of songs.
I'm just saying.
Yeah. So, but it talks about him just on his knees, like, God, show me the way, and he's feeling this moment of God's hiddenness, right? and that's an issue we have to deal with. So I saw that and I'm like, what if we could springboard, like these are big important questions. Even as Christians we have those questions, like about God's hiddenness. I mean, that's hard to deal with. And so
Yeah.
what if we took those elements from like secular songs like that and tried to somehow put them into conversation and respond to those, like take that song and then do a response to that or something like that. Um, Another great example would be, it's so funny. Iron Man is actually about Christ,
Hmm.
and Geezer Butler is the bass player, and he wrote for Black Sabbath, and he wrote almost all the lyrics. And he was on a show with Eddie Trunk, who is a very popular
We
metal
love your
DJ.
nation. Don't worry.
um,
Sirius XM.
and he interviewed Geezer Butler, and Geezer said, "Yeah, this is it's really a Christ-like figure, but instead of being like Christ, he comes back and gets really mad and kills everyone." And it's like, well, okay.
If he read his Bible a little bit closer and actually got to the end,
Did you get to the end?
That's so good.
But there's that. And things like James Hetfield has a lot. Like he grapples a lot with religion in his music and his lyrics, because his mom was in what do they call it? A Christian Science church.
Right.
And he sat there and watched her suffer because she wouldn't go to the hospital. And because the Christian Scientists are the type that all they do is you pray it away, and God's grace will heal you and all that kind of stuff. We don't take medicine. We don't, all that kind of stuff.
We got a cut there. It's going to be a weird cut. Dave, you know what happens when you bring up Christian Science? All sorts of weird things happen. All right. So rudely interrupted, but go ahead. You were talking about it.
Yeah. So yeah. Anyway, with James Hetfield, he kind of got soured on Christianity because because Christian Science is what he thought Christianity was, right? And about just having to pray things away, and that's how you get healed, and you can't use medicine, you can't go to the doctor, those kind of things. And Maynard James Keenan from Tool is the same way. So many of their songs are about that, and he watched his mother dwindle away, and he kept trying to get her help, and she wouldn't take his help, and she wouldn't get help, and so that really had an effect on him. So I see those as opportunities, maybe, to somehow find a way to engage with people on those topics, like people who are fans of Tool because of that song. Maybe we can find a way to connect and talk about those kind of things. Or there's a billion Metallica fans. They've done so many songs that have biblical themes. So I just see it as maybe an interesting way to engage with a secular audience, because these people singing these songs, they had these thoughts, they had these feelings. This is how they are chewing on these big ideas, and I mean, people do it in movies, they do it in stories, they kind of start with the premises. But I didn't see many people doing it in music, and I'm a huge music fan, so I thought, hey, this might be kind of interesting lane to get into.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept, because I mean, we started at the beginning, we were talking about music, audio, and how that sort of brings up the idea of human exceptionalism, and how that's sort of ingrained with us, with us being in the image of God, and then we also talked about a little bit more on the lyric side, on how it's sort of a teaching method, and we can ascend that to God. But now here we are, and what you just said, this is now almost a conversation that can be had between the non-believer and the believer.
Yep.
And even music is a way in which you can express yourself, and some of those expressions might be in confusion, in lament, in struggling through, the more deeper things of life, of why am I in this position and where is God in all of it.
Yeah.
I really like that, and I guess that sort of what that brings to mind is how much of music, maybe I'm going to try and word this correctly, and I can guarantee it's not going to come out right, but how much of our Christian music is merely worship,
Mm,
um and then how much of our music is not worship that will be on a Sunday, but maybe be the other voice in that conversation.
yeah. So you're thinking like what kind of music should we sing as worship in church services? Is that kind of where you're going?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's because I don't want to get too bogged down in what is worship.
Yeah.
We have a little bit of a different angle for this episode. I guess I'm asking more of the other side, not necessarily on what is Sunday, because I think that's a little bit more clear for us. Unless you want to answer that, go for it.
Well, well,
You're the
yeah,
music
you
guy.
go for. I think I have an example, but you go first,
But
Dave.
let
No,
me just finish this off, and then maybe we can answer both and riff off. But
Yeah,
like,
yeah, go on.
for example, Creed. This is a guy, Scott Stapp, who's writing music that he
oh,
believes is serving Christian purposes, and yet he didn't believe, right?
yeah,
And so he's having sort of that conversation that's starting with not the Christian end to respond. And then we might say maybe something like POD in their music. They're creating stuff that maybe won't be on a Sunday morning
right.
in your church, but is that voice that is responding forward. And I'm thinking, how much do we as Christians engage in that? Because I always hear also that, hey, your music sounds like it's too much about you, right? And
Hmm.
so I don't know, I'm just trying to get those thoughts and maybe put it on a terrible platter that's just kind of a tangled mess, and say, can you do something with this?
Yeah. But so I've thought a lot about songs in worship.
Right,
And because on the one hand, yeah, I mean so much of modern music, Christian worship music is like you said, it's kind of me centric. It's like I'm terrible, I suck, look at how bad I am, I'm so miserable, I don't deserve it. But I love Jesus.
right.
I'm so bad. It's like, I guess I've kind of come up with this axiom in terms of music in a church service. My,
Hmm.
my, the axiom that I try to live, I kind of judge things by is if there's more I's and me's in the lyrics than you's and he's, then I don't think it belongs in a worship service.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm
Um,
fine with getting rid of the first person, singular and plural too.
yeah, I
Right.
mean, I think
Unless you say I sinned, but that's okay. Or
I
I love
think
you.
yeah, I think that worship is supposed to be a corporate praise. We're
Right.
supposed to be vertically worshiping God. However, we also can't ignore that the majority category in the Psalms is lament.
Right.
you know, so and they certainly, I'm sure they sang those in their services, in the synagogues. So
A dirge.
I- so um, I feel like a lot of music, and so lament is definitely appropriate. And that's kind of like the Styx song that I was talking about. That's a lament. Like
Yeah.
he's crying out to God, like, why are you
Okay.
so
Yeah.
hidden from me? So
Yeah.
that's totally a lament. But I get, is that kind of where you were going? Like, I don't see lament as necessarily what the popular culture laments a lot. And I think we have an opportunity to engage with that type of music. Is that kind of what you're going for?
I don't think it was, but actually I find that to be a very fascinating point that you
Yeah,
just brought up. I'm sort of just
that's
still
what I thought
sitting
you
in
meant
that.
too. That's what I thought you meant as well. because
Two
like, I
Yeah.
Daves,
can't
think of
tell
what,
you.
you know.
Yeah,
Like how many,
The Daves are on the same side.
well, but
But
it's like I don't know how many concerts I've been to where like I'm in the crowd and I hear the singer just like crying out, having these, these, and then everyone having a corporate response of, having this existential crisis of, they realize the world is not perfect, that there's something in them. I would say it's the Imago Dei, that them being made in the image of God. They just don't know how to articulate it, but they just know that this world, something's wrong with this world. Not everything is as it should be. And they have this tension, and just like Romans 1, they are misplacing. They worship the creature or the creator. They just don't know where to do. Everyone's made to worship. They just don't know how to direct it and who to direct it towards. And I
right.
remember even being in the middle. I just got out of a mosh pit at a Five Finger Death Punch concert, and he's singing. There's a song called "Wash It All Away," "Wash It Away," and he's just crying out. He's given up on everything. He feels like he's wasting away, and he's just crying out rhetorical questions. Can anyone just wash it all away? And I just found myself. I felt alone, and I'm like, oh, if only he knew you, Jesus. Like,
Yeah.
like you're the answer to all of
Yep.
these rhetorical questions.
Yep.
And then I just think of, it's just, you just have this corporate body, like a Sunday, singing these lyrics, crying out these anthems at the top of their lungs. And it's amazing to have a sense of unity with that. And then at the same time, like, I know I'm going to go home and like, I don't have these doubts because I know the Lord. And then I'm not enjoying the only heaven I'll ever know because I'm like, this is, I've had moments where I've worshiped. That's why I'm saying this is kind of like Sunday, but not like Sunday, where I've worshiped the Lord in those moments, not because of the lyrics or not because I'm endorsing whatever message might be proclaimed at the time. But it's like, Lord, I know that there is someone who can wash it all away. It's you, and you did. And then I have
Right.
moments of like, oh my gosh, this is just a glimpse of heaven, of these humans just like singing in a thunderous chorus. We won't be singing these lyrics
Right.
in glory, but it's just a glimpse of the magnitude of the thousands and thousands and the thousands. Like a rushing wind and a mighty thunder praising him.
Yeah. You brought up
Yeah.
another interesting point.
I was gonna say, I just thought of a way to clarify more as I was thinking while Dave was talking.
Yeah, we
and
don't. Not
I wasn't
necessary.
listening because he doesn't really say much to listen to.
Yeah.
Well,
No, to clarify my question, I guess my question would be more, are we in the Christian side of secular laments reflecting on God? Are we engaging in that conversation enough, or should maybe something like, like, should Phil Wickham do more response to the world, trying to engage with it? Rather, I don't want to say rather than what he does for church services, but I guess I'm using that as an illustration to say, should Christian musicians maybe also want to focus a little bit more on that side?
well, I don't know that it has to be left up to Christian musicians, because and I was thinking about this as Dave was talking, so I wasn't listening either. But
Do I need to? I can just I can have my computer freeze and I can bail. You know what I'm saying?
We'll just mute him.
no, the ground is there for other fans to have conversations with other fans of the music, is what I'm thinking, as opposed
okay.
to
Yeah.
as opposed to letting Phil Wickham give a response. Because, and this is another thing that kind of struck me about music is, when you get started in apologetics, you're like, oh, apologetics is the 5 classic arguments,
Right.
again, we went through them in the beginning. But honestly, like, regular folk don't engage with those things.
Right.
They really don't. The only argument that an average person can really, that you can really kind of engage with them on, would be the problem of evil,
Right.
because it's obvious to everyone. But when you start talking about fine tuning and kalam and all that kind of stuff, the arguments are simple, but it's like to back up the arguments, it gets a little complicated, and they aren't really interested in that stuff. But lots of people love music, and lots of people love movies, and lots of people love books. So why not engage in those arenas and use those as talking points and common connections, and finding common ground in that stuff.
And Mike, I would also argue for you as well, why I wouldn't have necessarily Phil Wickham have to do a stance either. What's interesting is that Christian contemporary music, like worship music, that's one of the few genres, if not the only genre, where they purposely write their music with the purpose of it being able to be recreated and to be done on the average Sunday morning.
Right.
By, like most artists don't want people to, hey, cover my song. Sometimes it's fun and they feature them and it's a tribute or it's an honorable thing. But most people aren't writing music with the goal of it being able to be played by multiple people, multiple venues over the country, like throughout the country.
Yeah,
and the
well, I
world.
guess what I'm asking is, do we need more bands like MXPX when they came out and POD, where they're making songs that aren't going to be on a Sunday, but something that, sort of bridges the between of church and culture, where you can see them play with, like, where they're at now with Goldfinger.
Well, that is an area that is alive and well. It's just that we don't hear about it very much. And so there's bands like, have you ever heard? There's a band called Petra. They're kind of like the classic
Petra's
rock
great.
version.
The underground.
There's there's all kind.
You got Barren Cross, White
Cross, right? Like those guys.
Striper, X-Sinner.
People get saved like crazy at those shows, like crazy. So many people come to know the Lord in those environments.
Yeah. Warrior Disciple.
Yeah, man. So it happens. It's just, and it's funny because I was a little frustrated about this actual fact, because I've been a huge music fan all my life, and I didn't really realize up until maybe 4 or 5 years ago that there was there's a lot of Christian, like a lot of Christian rock and Christian metal to be exposed to. I wasn't exposed to any of it. I knew Striper, but that was it. And I kind of heard about POD maybe being a Christian band, and having some stuff, although, their more recent stuff is not, they're pretty bold in the beginning with their earlier albums, but not as much anymore.
Right.
But
can
anyway,
I cut in real quick?
Yeah.
On this? Because this is actually going right into one thing that I did want to ask you, and I'm sure other people, have this going on in the back of their mind as we're speaking even about these bands. Should we as Christians be engaging in some of these genres? Should we be having Christian death metal? Should we be
100%.
just attaching Christian to all these genres?
Yeah, 100%. And I know, I get it. Like, it's called death metal, and it's kind of weird.
That's why I chose that one.
I get it, and wearing corpse paint, like like the Swedes do,
Yeah,
is a little weird. But
let's burn churches.
But yeah, we definitely need to be in a lot of the genres, and so I'm part of this Facebook group called the Christian Metal, and on Facebook, and there's about 30,000 members, global members in the group, and I would say at least 1/10 of them are not believers, but they're there because they really like the music. So yeah, 100%. We should be because like I just said, they're an amazing evangelistic tool. Like it's kind of interesting. I thought about this too. I think people tend to be attracted to the sound that they're listening to before they engage with the lyrics,
Hmm.
right?
Correct. All
So
the
if
time.
if
Yep.
you find like David brought up White Cross. The direct parallel that gets made from White Cross is well to White Cross is often Van Halen um because Rex Carroll is the guitar player for White Cross and he's just a beast and he's
Oh, he
uh,
can shred.
he's a shredder. I mean he
Yeah.
is yeah he is like Eddie Van Halen.
He
And
can
then of course
elevate.
the sit well they're not together anymore but the singer of White Cross, the guy that used to be to sing for them, used to sound like Stephen Pearcy from Rat. So um you know but yeah, there are direct parallels, so people will listen to that guy because it's like, man, that guy sounds like Eddie Van Halen. I really like
Yeah.
Eddie Van Halen.
Ex
So
Sinners,
yep,
AC/DC, Barren
yep.
Cross's Iron Maiden, little Judas Priest sometimes too. You got, gosh, so many.
Well,
And then you have like
and
90s bands too.
right, and there's even so there's a but there's a lot of Christians also like myself, like they come into the group often and they say, is there a Christian version of insert band name here? And it's because they like the way that other band sounds, but they want to be edified by more Christian lyrics.
Yeah.
And sometimes they get beat up about asking it like that because, well, you should like a band because of who they are. And it's like, no, we're using this as a categorical term. Like, do I go under the group and do I say, I like bands who have shredding guitars and they have double bass, or do you just say, I want a band that sounds like Metallica? You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like,
It's
it's so
very
much easier to say
shorthand.
that.
Yeah.
So,
It's
um,
it's funny that you say that too because I've had people ask me certain things like that and I have created, sort of a list when people do come up to that and say, "Hey, is there any like Christian rap?" And I'll say, "All right,
yeah,
here's like 5 of them. Go off, listen to
Datin,
Pandora with
man.
these,
Yeah.
uh but I sort of have that story too in that when I was powerlifting, I was like, I need something to pump me up, so I would listen to metal. And then while I was doing it, midway through my set, I was just like, I'm hearing blood and death and all this other stuff. And I'm like, I probably
Yeah.
shouldn't be listening to this. So I turned it off, finished my
Yep.
workout, and then that motivated me for right after my workout to look up Christian metal. And I came across bands like Karis. I came across bands like For Today. And I
Hmm.
and I start I started to see
Theocracy.
Yeah,
I
man.
started to see that there is this sort of
Brilliant
vibrant
theology.
community that is sort of under the surface that is
Yeah.
in some sense undiscovered. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And that's so true. I mean, my example of that would be Pantera.
Hmm.
I was a massive, I still kind of am, a massive Pantera fan, like massive.
Cowboy from Heaven.
And but there's and the thing is, like, one of the things, because I'm not one of these guys who says, yeah, I just ignore the lyrics. Like I can't do that. Like I
Yeah.
intentionally am drawn to certain songs because of the lyrics. And this is before I was saved. Like, there were some songs that I would listen to because I wanted to be pissed off.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted. And then like, once I was saved, I can't listen to those songs anymore because
Right.
they just don't feel right. So to take it on to what we're talking about, but I still like that sound. So
Yeah.
I want a band that sounds like Pantera because they're amazing. you know.
Yeah.
So
I knew someone that said that they would listen to metal when they worked out and they said, I can only listen to it for so long before I notice that it starts to affect my mood. So I have to
sure,
do it in certain spurts. It's just kind of like
yeah,
what you were saying.
yeah,
I don't think they were listening to, Christian metal. I think they were just using, but
right,
yeah, it does. And in some sense, that is one reason why we listen to worship or we listen to things that bring us in awe of God. It's like we can ascend our hearts in the same way that we can allow, some some music to aggravate us or even bring us down. I mean,
Yeah.
how many teenagers out there are experiencing heartbreak, but have never been in a relationship, right? They're like, and it's like, well, what are
But
you listening to? It's like the latest heartthrob in his heartbreak song. It's like
Yeah.
yeah,
they're experiencing heartbreak and yet they've never even been in a relationship. So it is funny that our music can affect us in such a way. I did want to bring up
it-
this topic.
yeah.
Oh, Dave, did you want to say something? Go
Well,
for it.
I was just thinking, like, yeah, like I just found the Christian equivalents. I was like, oh, you like power ballads? Here's a lament. You like death metal? Here's an imprecatory prayer.
Yeah.
Let's break off some teeth. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying? Let's get after it.
Yeah.
so true. So true. I actually did
And,
want to
and
announce
I,
that. Oh, go
I'm
for it.
sorry. One more thing I'm thinking of too. We're talking about contemporary worship. A lot of songs in the metal genre, and we're making this a kind of a metal heavy show. I know there's so many more
I
genres of
mean,
music to
yeah,
get into,
we
but
definitely listen to it.
but there are some songs that are way more theologically sound in the metal scene than the songs that we sing in
It's
modern worship.
so funny. I have said that so many times because it's like, oh, people have said, what's your favorite like worship song? And I'm like, it's not gonna be what you're looking for.
No,
My
I
favorite
am
worship
by
songs are
theocracy.
metal, and they look at me like I have a second head,
Yeah.
because they're expecting Oceans or something from
Right.
Hillsong. And I said, you know what? I find that Christian metal is far more biblical and centered and unapologetically for Christ
Oh yeah.
than what you're worshiping with on Sunday.
Yep.
And I don't know how many times I've said this, but like there are some Christian metal songs that bring me to tears.
Yeah.
Because it's so powerful.
Yeah.
And yeah, no, so yeah,
I
I agree.
mean, David's been he's been tossing out these theocracy songs in the background, kind of in a
Dude, I
jokey
am so
manner,
best.
but they have this one song called "Laying the Demon to Rest," man, and that
Oh, it's
song,
so good.
like that song will wreck me if I'm in the right mood because
Right.
it's so good. But yeah, it's kind of interesting that you say that because I'm just now thinking about how that you said bold. That's a great way to describe it because and unapologetic because that's one of the hallmarks of metal music, right? Is to be bold and unapologetic about the things that you're going to say. So that's pretty good. I like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, here's one thing. First, I forgot to announce this at the beginning of the episode, which is so funny because I told you, Dave, that like, hey, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna announce this, and then I'll introduce you, and then I forgot to announce it. But folks, we here are going to be opening up and unveiling ground level theology music. And we have been building in the background for a few weeks. We have been laboring. Our hands and fingertips are bleeding for you guys.
I have calluses on my fingertips.
But we have gone through many genres, collecting AI music that is unapologetically Christian, stuff that we think sounds good and will be great for you guys, whatever genre you're looking for, to just kind of grab that, play it, enjoy it, and have it all in one space. And so hopefully we'll be unrolling that out by the time the same week, hopefully the same time this episode airs. So be looking out for that. I will be opening it up in a way to where our viewers don't get notified about like 12,000 videos or something like that. Because I would still like to have subscribers at the end of that week. But we will be unrolling that. So once this episode drops and you learn about it, feel free to scroll down our page and see that we have genres out that I know we'll have out because we just finished them. Contemporary Christian music. We have bluegrass, actually. We do have country as well, so some of you guys are already tuning out. And we'll bring you back in with, we have hard rock and we have metal already. I'm currently working on ska. We'll maybe get some jazz and some other
Nice
things,
yacht
and we'll
rock.
build it out more and more. We also have a lo-fi section, which is hilarious because when you think about it, it's all instrumental. So how do you develop a Christian lo-fi? But we have it. We did it. So it'll all be there. Go ahead and look at that, folks. We just wanted to give you guys sort of a little bit of a center for you guys to see, and we do plan on posting more and more and adding it throughout time. So just keep looking out for that, and more music will be posted. Dave, that being said, AI music, yay or nay?
It depends.
This is a can of worms. I know I'm opening
It-
up right now.
I like the it depends. That's a good answer. I like
It
anyone.
depends.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
I'm cool with the way that you're using it as the intro song, because it people expect to see intro songs in podcast or in things like this, or in when you get to a podcast or whatever. And it is, for people like us, it is somewhat cost prohibitive to pay royalties on a song. And it's easy to go and create something quick and easy and whatever, and put it into our show. That sounds pretty cool. But so our theology should inform everything that we do, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things that I'm really, really trying to have a passion and a care for is the music community.
Right.
And so when I talk about how my theology informs that, what that means is supporting people who are making music.
Right.
And we just talked about how not many people know about these bands that we've been talking about. So the way that people find out about these things isn't going to be probably through an algorithm. And that's not how I learned about most of the music when I was growing up. I learned about most of my music. It's kind of interesting because now we have so much at our hands where we can search for things, but the areas are so saturated with content. It's really, really hard to find the good stuff. So we have to rely upon the people that we know now to recommend bands to us, right?
Right.
Rather than algorithms, because algorithms really aren't going to catch the good stuff. And algorithms are manipulated. Like, for example,
Right.
you're talking about Spotify, you're talking about AI music. Spotify has been creating playlists of, their top whatever playlists, and they're full of AI music that they've generated, and they get promoted. So what that means is that there's nobody, that Spotify's making all the money. Like, they don't have to pay royalties to anyone because they're using AI music, right?
Right.
But this platform of Spotify is a massive conduit for people to learn about new musicians, and it really does it stuff like Spotify really does kind of equal the playing field, because I pay the same amount of money as some other, well, maybe not necessarily the same amount of money, but it's not very cost prohibitive to get in there. It's really inexpensive for me to put my music in Spotify. It takes a lot of effort then to get it played enough that I start getting royalties off of it, and the royalties are, frankly, they're nothing. They're like a third. In Spotify specifically, they're a third of a cent for every stream that gets played. So all that to say, I think that our responsibility should be to promote people who are trying to make a living at making music. And because a lot of these guys see it as a ministry, just like we talked about, right? So, so what I've been doing is, I have been very consciously purchasing all of my music. So I will go and buy a CD, and I'm trying to, and I'm not spending. I buy a couple CDs a month, so I'm not spend a bunch of money, but I'm trying to be very intentional about the way that I spend my money, because I want to put money into the pockets of people who are still actively creating music, because I want to encourage them to create more music. And so that's where I think our focus should be, is trying, if there's already people out there who are making the music that we want to hear, it's just hard for us to find it. So we should try to find it and encourage those people who are making it. And the way that starts is making playlists of people who actually are people, and then promoting those playlists and getting them heard, which gets them more fans. And even though I buy my CDs still, I will still stream them on Spotify, because that's the way that a lot of people are finding out about them. And they're putting their music on Spotify because they want people to find them. And the only way they get found is if they get heard. Like, Spotify doesn't start paying an artist, and I'm kind of beating up on Spotify just because they're the ones that I know the most about. There's other places that do the same thing. But if an artist doesn't get 1,000 streams a day, they don't get paid. So, and it takes for someone to make just an average, an average 40-hour work week, minimum wage job, their song has to be streamed. I think the math is like their stuff has to be streamed over 1 million times before they make like a normal worker's wage. And and because it's so easy to get on there, it's really, 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 really hard for people to be found and for people to get paid. So my thought would be, let's promote the people who are actually trying to make a go of this and encourage them.
Does that need to be mutually exclusive to like enjoying AI music though?
If you want to create the music for yourself, that would be different. But if you want to promote music for people to engage with, then why not promote music that already exists and has people behind it, and then also helps them out? Because when you introduce AI music into the creative sphere, that's just more competition that person now has to listen to be found. And there have been I forget who it was. There's a YouTube channel out there who he creates. I don't know if he's still active or not, but he was creating music in the style of Jay-Z or someone like that, right? And he would even put. And the scary thing is, people really don't care. Honestly, the people that are listening to the music, they don't care, which is kind of a bummer, because he even put it in the bottom, like, this is AI generated music meant to sound like Jay-Z or whoever it was. It wasn't Jay-Z, but somebody like that. And the song still got like 6 million plays. People don't care. And that's kind of the bummer, is like, I want people to care about music, and I want people to care about the people who make music. So that's just kind of where I'm coming from.
Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, we came into this, you and I both knew that this was sort of going to be a little bit of a contentious part. And just for you folks at home to know, we already know this, and we're both brothers. I mean, he's still on the air. I brought him on for this reason. That's the beautiful thing about being brothers and sisters. But I mean, just to take that example of Jay-Z, that person can create a song with Jay-Z's voice, but then let's just say, instead of the lyrics of what Jay-Z talks about, we can say, glorifying Christ. And that's essentially what our ground level theology is doing. We're trying to take these sounds and bring them in an unapologetically worshipful setting.
But you're presuming that there isn't someone out there already that sounds like Jay-Z that has Christian lyrics. It's a real person.
Well, and I'd like to interject. I know one reason why I, as a musician, why I like it and wanted to do it was because, number one, this is coming off of an episode where we wanted to show how AI can be used positively, because we had an episode on the dangers and the strengths and weaknesses of AI. And then I also purposely, when I'm doing my prompts of like how I want it to sound, I purposely do not choose songs that sound like artists that already exist. I try my best
Mhm.
because I don't want someone, because I know how dangerous it is where it's like, oh my gosh, that sounds like me, but I did not write that.
Yeah.
And I don't want that, you know,
Yeah.
because like, oh my gosh, that sounds like me, but that's not me. Oh my gosh, that sounds like so and so, and it's like, well, but it's not them, it's AI. And one of the complex things about AI is that it can take, because it's artificial intelligence, it takes all the stuff that exists out there,
Yep.
which includes musical notes, um, which also includes stylistic elements of like, oh my gosh, well, that sweep picking sounds like so and so, but also a lot of sweep picking can sound the same in general in a particular subgenre of and that's just guitars, you know what I mean? Like, and so I could do a prompt that says, all right, I want a 68 Les Paul through a Marshall stack with with a slash wah pedal, and I can get it kind of close to sound like Guns N' Roses, even though the prompt is like, they also could have come up with who knows what, where it sounds like Jimi Hendrix, even though his is a Fender and not through a Marshall stack and it's a different wah. But because you can ask Mike also, that's the downside of AI, where I put in, I literally copy and pasted the same prompt, and I've gotten like, that sounds
Sure.
like Motley Crue, that sounds like Led Zeppelin, that sounds
Yeah.
like the Beatles, and then that sounds like Nirvana, and I'm like,
Yeah.
it's the same prompt.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another thought too, though, is I mean, we talked in the beginning that I am an apologist, and my
Right.
main thing is my website. Is it okay to plug it now?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Shameless
Either
plug.
way, I'm gonna ask you
Shameless
for
plug.
all your social medias,
We'll
folks.
link
It's
it
gonna be
below.
in the description.
Yeah, my main website is legatichristi.org, and that site, I mean, I've been writing on that site since 2018.
Yeah.
And it's taken me that long to have an average of 20 people visited a day. So, and I spend hours and hours and hours writing those articles because I want people to read it. And I write them as a service to the Lord. I really do. It's like,
Right.
when I'm writing them, I say, God, I want you to just take this, and I want people that need to read it. I want you to experience that. And I want there to be value to what I'm doing. And but it's so easy for someone to just go into ChatGPT and say, I need an article about the Kalam cosmological argument. And then boom, here it comes. And then they put it up. And then because they maybe know a little bit more about SEO than I do, or can word it a little better, their article gets picked over mine. And that's very discouraging. And I guess, of course, then it depends on what is the goal, and if the goal is for someone to engage with good content, and they do, and it shouldn't really matter to me. But even so, this is something that I feel fulfilled in to the Lord in doing this process, in writing and getting these things out there. It really it edifies me, and I want people to take it. I want people to read it because I feel like the Lord's put these things on my heart, and I feel like I write okay, and it's easy enough to read. So the more noise there is in front of me, though, the harder it makes it for people to find me. And I'm actually doing the work, and as opposed to someone who's just typing in a prompt and then, whatever. So it can be very discouraging as a person who is trying to be creative when something like this is just making a lot more noise, and people don't care,
Right.
like they don't care if it's AI generated. They don't care if it's a human person. They just want it to be good. And if the AI can, I mean, and they really aren't, the average person really isn't very distinguishing. If you know music, if you understand music, then maybe you can be more distinguishing and you can pick up on those kind of things. But the average person doesn't really care. So why muddy the waters any more than you have to, is my thought.
I have a question, and this just popped in my head. I'm not trying to like stump you or anything, or just put you on the spot. Thoughts on EDM? Do you have a composer that's orchestrating pre-recorded tracks and there's still like a composition element to it,
Mm-hmm.
or not the same thing as a guy sitting down and like, I wrote the intro, and then you just were able to kind of plug in, like I had to plug and play
Yeah.
and practice and then you were just able to kind of, copy and paste it in a syncopated,
So are you talking about kind of going back to sampling, I guess, in essence, right?
Sure.
Like
We're gonna be, and it's gonna get worse and worse in this aspect of like we're really starting to engage a lot more in a philosophy of music, and then even
Yeah.
Right.
we're already engaging in this, but we're gonna engage in this probably a little bit more, of the ethics of AI, right? A little bit
Mhm.
more of the like
Right.
the minutia and the logistics of that. So I guess what he's saying is, when it comes to AI, you type in a prompt, you look through, you see what works, what doesn't, discard what doesn't, and so in some sense you've worked at it to compose, in some sense, this song in a matter of seconds. But then when it comes to EDM, these are pre-recorded songs, and we're talking. Yeah, I think Dave's trying to get more at DJs than EDM specifically. But you have DJs.
No, I called out EDM, Mike. Don't put words in my mouth. No,
But
just
you have whole tracks here that are simply being kind of thrown together, so in a very simplistic form, overly simplistic. So if anyone is listening and likes that music,
All you
let me say
purists.
it's a caricature, but you're mixing two volume buttons, and
Yeah.
are we gonna then call out EDM music?
Yeah. I mean, so I had another thought that's kind of maybe somewhat in parallel with where you're going with this. Like how much not human is okay, right? Is that kind of where we're
Exactly.
going with this question, right?
Yeah.
So there's, and this happens a lot, like in the Facebook group I'm talking about. And this is kind of a thing now where people, like it used to be when you made a band, like you had to figure out how to work together. But now there are so many people definitely in the Christian music scene who are a band, but it's really one guy who's done all this stuff in the background. Like he programs the drums, he whatever, right? He goes into, he likes that beat from the bass or whatever. So I get it. There's still like a human kind of behind that in terms, like a lot of times what happens is you'll get a guy who sings the vocals and he plays guitar, but he doesn't have a drummer, he doesn't have a bass player, he doesn't have a keyboard player, so he kind of programs that stuff in there. So that has been happening for decades, right?
Right.
The funny thing is and I hear this from drummers the most, like when
Triggers suck.
people think that they can just program drums, and they can. So they think that the drummer's kind of irreplaceable, but there's so many times where a drummer will listen to a track and say, you can't play that on drums.
Yeah.
Like, so
Yeah.
I
That's a
do
jump.
have, I mean,
True.
I guess for the person who's really a connoisseur, a really deep connoisseur of music, I do have hope, because they can spot things that aren't authentic.
Right.
And another thing too with AI, I'm thinking about this time when gosh, who was it? There was a vocalist from this band called Saliva, which was a band in the 2000s. And the vocalist, they were hugely popular at that time. They had a couple really big albums. He went on to the Howard Stern show, and the vocalist did, and they had the judges from American Idol sitting there, and they didn't know who this guy was. They thought he was just some rando off the street. And so he gets up there and sings one of his songs, and Howard, of course, has tricked them, right? And because there's a certain humanness to his voice, and there's a certain even with things like jazz, like music now, the way that music has been done since since the 2000s is when it started to become digitized, there's this process called quantization. And what that means is you get you have a track on the computer, and then the beats fall at a certain point in time. And what started happening in the 2000s was they started to make, like, usually when a drummer plays, whenever you hear in jazz, they say, swing it. What that means is they're not playing on the beat. They're playing all before the beat. They're playing a little after the beat, but they're never on the beat. That's what swinging it, right? So there's something to that. But when it's perfectly mechanized every single time, it definitely loses its humanness. And I think that I mean, I don't know. At some point, AI is probably going to get over that. You know, but there's a certain human quality that a lot of times you can listen to it and it just feels cold. It feels fake. It doesn't feel right.
Is that not always my complaint, Mike? It's like, yeah, you can make this fit in time, but no one would actually do that. You would
That's right.
pause.
Yeah,
That's
we
right.
talk about this too.
Like, as a drummer, I was like, no, like no. I can't sweep pick at 200 beats per minute
Right.
for,
Yeah, it's funny
20
too
measures.
because I said this when we were developing our bluegrass playlist. I was like, typically, during a song there's a part where in bluegrass, I mean, you just really get a hoedown thing and everyone's just going crazy and that banjo's going crazy for a couple seconds or so, maybe 20 seconds, and then he goes back to like a pretty nice and simple rhythm for the verses to come through. Well, AI doesn't have fingers and doesn't get tired. So with some of these songs, that banjo is just shredding for the entire song, which sounds awesome, right? There's definitely quite a few songs in each of those playlists that I really, really do enjoy, especially the metal playlist. I find myself listening to that one a lot. Yeah, and Dave is the coordinator of that one.
And the album order. The album order champion.
Dave has put his expertise on the order. So whenever we finish it, I always send it to him and say, hey, what's the best order for this?
You don't do a thrasher right into a power ballad and then 3 power ballads or 4 thrashers. You gotta break it up, man.
Yeah, but there is an aspect too of, even when you listen to it, there's just some things that, like, this would not be in a humanly made song, and that's just one aspect of it too. It's like you don't solo for the entire song as a rhythm. Typically you get too tired to do that, and you can do some of that stuff.
Yeah. So I maybe to your point, if I was
we're doing it.
Yeah, it's still being released.
So I get it, like, because I'm not musical. Like I don't play any instruments, so if there was something that I don't know, I guess on the one hand I could understand some people wanting to, if they want Pantera, like if they wanted to hear Phil Anselmo sing This Little Light of Mine, let's go make a song.
Yeah.
That sounds like Pantera singing This Little Light of Mine. I get it,
Now that would be, if I can create that, oh my gosh,
dude,
I will send it right to you. That's what an idea.
Do you know One Bad Pig?
Yeah.
Do you know the song Schoolhouse Rock that they did?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. That's like, we're going like back in the vault. That was like when I was in high school.
So anyway, but yeah, so if for people's personal gratification, if they want to go and do that and make music, I get it. I get that. I think as people with a platform, we have responsibility to try and pull other people up and who are trying to do that same kind of thing. Like, here we are we're trying to get a message out. We want people to listen to this thing that we're talking about. And there are other people that are out there trying to make music, and they want people to hear these things that they're doing because they really glorify God in what they do.
Yeah.
So let's focus on them. That's my thought.
And I agree with that sentiment as well. I mean, Dave and I were talking, before you came up and we started to do this episode and stuff, and we were reflecting about the time back when I, because I knew we were switching to self-service at Walmarts and stuff, and I wanted to push against that because
Mhm.
the immediate thing, and we see this at McDonald's now. I mean, it's been so long since when I was doing this, and we've come so far even from there. I just knew, okay, if we allow automated AI or self-service stuff, we lose people having jobs.
Yep.
So I was very hardcore with like, I'll wait 10 minutes. That self-service might be right there, and I only have one or two items. And Dave was like, yeah, but I was carrying like 3 gallons, and you were just standing there. I was waiting for you. But I would wait that long because I said, no, I want to interact with a human.
You want to signal to the people that work there that you value this person standing at the desk.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which
Yep.
is why I purposely scanned an item one too many times and then called them over here to fix it. You're welcome, ma'am.
I can get the sentiment is in that, but then I also think back and maybe we can come back to this and do sort of an ethical episode on AI and even some of these conversations, because we're running right here at the end of the episode, and I really do think there's quite a deeper conversation to have here that can certainly be a full episode. But yeah, there's what you're speaking of is really the ethics of we want to uplift humans, we want to support people that are actually doing the work. And to be frank, as AI works, it works off of the backs of the foundation that humans are developing this. And we said this in the AI episode, it's like AI is only as good as the inputs that are putting into it. If AI music persists and people fall away because AI music replaces, then it devolves. And then you have not good music, to put it lightly. But so long as people input into it, then AI music can be really good. And it's pretty good right now. But you can certainly see the difference. And I've listened to quite a bit of AI, but then I'll listen to like Elvis, right? And I'm like, man, there is something there, speaking to your aesthetic argument in apologetics. But I also think as from an artist standpoint, I have a degree. I did a lot of fine art. You pour hours and hours and hours into one little piece, but AI artwork is able to produce within seconds, and I don't even try to compose or write or draw things that much anymore. I do go to Chat GPT for this. I mean we all have Chat GPT backgrounds. We're not
Sure.
we're not going to pay an artist for our backgrounds. So I mean there's a broader question or a broader conversation that needs to be had about where that line is, and how, more specifically, how we can continue to support human interactions, and that's for the betterment of our society, really.
And I don't want to sit here and get on my proverbial soapbox and say I'm anti AI, because clearly this background that I'm using is AI generated, right. And especially with images, like you can put in these kind of creative ideas and come up with image. Like I've been using it for images on my articles. Like on the site that I'm here talking about now, I've created another site. Like I'm making a side project for my side, because I'm not a full-time apologist either. I have another job. But I've created a separate site for this whole idea of theology and music. And one of the images that I created, because the kind of "this is my story" article that every blog has to have is called "Behind the Theology and Music." Yeah. Because I grew up watching Behind the Music on VH1 like all the time, right? So I wanted an image that looked like the Behind the Music logo, right? So I went on there and tried to manipulate some things to get that logo, and I would have had to pay somebody a couple $100 for something like that, and I am broke, right. So I don't have that kind of money to do it. So I get that, but there is a line, and it is interesting to try to figure out where that line is going to be.
And I don't think we'll come anywhere close to, an answer right now. But I do think it's an interesting conversation to, to have and to dwell on more. I think the conversation needs to be brought up, which is why I really, I was excited not only to have you bring up the conversation on aesthetics, beauty, and music, and to really come at it from that theological perspective, but even to bring this conversation up as we're unveiling this, right? And just sort of people can engage with that music, but also know in the background, hey, if you like this music, maybe you want to see who's out there that is doing this, right? So and I'm with you on that. One of the things that I always lament is the death of Christian metal bands. Like they sort of are able to produce an album and then they sort of stop very often because there isn't really an audience to support them. And I mean, you could do what you love, but it's hard to keep that up. And so, Karis is one. They did one album and then they stopped. And then you have For Today. They did, a few albums and then they stopped their band and not for any bad reason. He's head of a missions organization now, but
Yeah.
It's almost like there's a lifespan to these bands. And that's the unfortunate part, and it's because they don't get sort of the light that they deserve and the support that they need to keep it up. So absolutely, but you highlight this on like Spotify playlists, right?
What do you mean?
Like you bring up these bands and sort of try and bring them into one place for people to kind of encounter them.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, and it's music that I love. And that's kind of what, I don't know how many different, most of my playlists are probably genre specific. Right.
Yeah.
And yeah, like I create playlists and try to share them with people. And, I always kind of make the joke of I'm like a John Woo movie with music playlist, right? Like I'm firing them off like bullets, like crazy. Like in a John Woo movie, you never run out of bullets, and that's how I am. I'm like, oh, dude, you gotta check this out. You gotta check that out. You gotta check that out. So yeah, I definitely make genre specific playlists, and I share them with people. Like when I find out, I mean, I'm sorry, I don't have any psychobilly playlists to share with you, but
Right.
but yeah, I create a lot of playlists to share with people. That's another way that you help some of these artists is when you put them in playlists on Spotify, and then you play somebody like I don't know, this band, this is Sleeping Giant. I don't know if you guys they don't exist
Demi is
anymore.
amazing.
Yeah,
Demi
so
is-
dude,
Yeah, it's not
it's
showing up
a
too much.
great
dude,
song.
you're talking about workout songs, bro. Like
Sleeping
Tiffany,
Giant's great.
Tiffany and Preach Core Lives. I get so freaking pumped when I listen to those songs. I'm ready to
Nice.
go.
This is Declaration, buddy. It's great.
Well,
Yeah.
I love
Anyway,
it.
yeah. So,
Yeah.
but when you put a band, I mean, and unfortunately they don't exist anymore. That he's moved on to another band now that he has called Holy Name. But when you put bands like this in with more popular kind of hardcore bands of that same genre, and then you play them together on the same playlist, that's kind of a signal to Spotify that says, oh, people who like Sleeping Giant, they also like this other band, or people who like this other band also like Sleeping Giant, so we should play them. We should suggest that to someone. So yeah, I mean that's kind of one of the reasons to make those playlists there. And yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's what Spotify actually does, and I have it
Right.
too. Like they and it's every week release radar or also Discover Weekly. Hey, based off music that you like listening to, it's always suggested. Oh,
Yeah.
oh, you might like them, or hey, a band that you like, you didn't know that they came out with a new EP
yeah,
or something. Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah.
Just
No, I
it
agree.
takes
I
fun.
mean, I think we should be in the business of highlighting and putting a spotlight on Christian artists out there that are doing the work. One of the things that I really enjoyed in growing up at my church at Calvary Chapel, Pasadena, was we had, like, I think it was once a month or maybe a little bit more, but Pastor X would bring down an upcoming Christian artist and they would have a concert in the church. And it was sort of an evangelistic endeavor, but it really helped lift up. And I have, CDs that I got from those people. I got to listen to Phil Wickham before he really got famous, and I got his signature. The funny thing that I always tell people about that, I met Phil Wickham when I was like knee high to a duck, right? I was so young. I was behind my brother's leg when I went to church. The funny part of that story is he came and he performed, and I absolutely fell in love with his music. And when I bought his CD, and I say that with, it was my dad's money, but when I went to go get it signed, I gave it to him with the Sharpie, and he said, "You want me to sign this?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he said, "Do you want me to take off the plastic for you?" and I was so scared. I said no. So he signed it with the plastic, so I don't have his signature now, but I have the CD. and here he is. He's a big name, and he's done so well for himself, and he's honestly been someone that I've really enjoyed seeing him grow. But I got to see him when he wasn't famous and he was highlighted, and I guess I'm just trying to show that, like, folks, we can do that if we spend a little bit of time to, maybe as churches or as individuals, to take the time to go out there and find them.
I just thought of something. You want to talk about impact? Let's talk about the impact that Calvary Chapel in the 70s and the 60s had on Christian music, bro.
Yeah,
like
Maranatha music and stuff.
We could go on for another 3 hours about that, everybody that came out of, no, seriously, like everybody that came out of Calvary Chapel in California, various branches. I mean, so many bands that were coming up in like the 70s and the 80s, they say, "Oh yeah, I attended Calvary Chapel and da 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 da." It's like, man, they had a major impact.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, man, there is so much conversation. We can just keep going down, and honestly, I'm really enjoying it. But we are here at the end of the episode. Dave, give us some social medias where we can see you at. What are you doing? What are you up to? What are you on? What are you highlighting? Just give us everything, and please send it to me after. It will be down in the description, folks. There will be a description, and everything underneath will be what he's up to, what he's doing, and then some of what we've been talking about.
Yeah, sure.
David Gilmore.
Yeah. The main place where I write is LegatiChristi.org, and that's kind of a general apologetics site. And I've been doing some systematic theology stuff recently, putting some lessons out for people to be able to download and maybe hopefully use in their small groups and stuff like that. This project that we're talking about, and that I'm at Legati Christi everywhere for those places. And then this project that is really kind of it's really a major passion project of mine. This is theologyandmusic.com. And then I'm at Theology and Music everywhere. I'm actually more active at Theology and Music in most places than I am at Legati Christi. I just use that as a channel to get my content out mostly, but I definitely engage mostly on, Instagram, things like that. So.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, you heard it there, folks. That is David Gilmore. Phenomenal. And it's been a pleasure to have you on with us. So much conversation we've had here about music, a philosophy, an apologetic. We dove into some deep topics, and guys, there is so much more to discuss. I hope it just started the conversation in your brain, not only about how important music is to you and your relationship with God, the fact that music exists because He made it that way. How amazing is that? Creation itself is showing God's image But then also our relationship with him, we can worship him in music. And then even the relationship we have to each other. I mean, music is so encompassing, and yet, you know, we sometimes take it for granted. And then even beyond that, how can we as brothers and sisters lift each other up, right? Whether it be through creating music, if it be AI, if not, stay away from that stuff. Go to the people themselves and support them, and we agree. Go and support the artists out there. We hope you really enjoyed this episode. It is quite the topic, and we have so much more lined up in this season. The season's running down. I know. It feels like we just started, and yet here we are, an action-packed season. So be looking out every Wednesday at 5, because they drop new and they drop fresh. So we enjoyed. Don't forget to like. Don't forget to share. Don't forget to subscribe. Let us know down in the comment section who your favorite band is. Christian metal band, Christian ska band, whatever it is. What type of music do you like to listen to? Throw that down in the comment section. But with all that being said, we're going to see you in the next episode. See ya.
Shine on.
Peace.